women, young women between 18 and 34, the liberal side of the spectrum are not getting married and having children.
We surveyed women in Canada and asked about their fertility intentions and learned that half of Canadian women have fewer children than they would have ideally desired to have. Don't think about whether you want to have children at age 20 or 30 or 40. Think about what it'll be like to have no children at age 70 or 80 or 90. It can't really compensate for feelings of loneliness or this aspect of your life that went unfulfilled. So second wave feminism deserves a lot of the blame in my view, because it's not a reasonable view and it's not well expressed when you read the primary sources. Oftentimes reading some of the second wave feminist primary sources is just absolutely chaotic and there's no real point to it, and it's hard to even get at what they're angry about in some parts, right?
Let's see what we can do to have a life of abundance. And not getting married, not having kids doesn't sound abundant to me. Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning, Tammy. How are you?
Very well. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
This is the book that you wrote. I Do. Why Marriage Still Matters. That's the book you wrote. And it's by Andrea. Let me put my fingers out of the way. Andrea and Peter John Mitchell.
Yep, my longtime colleague.
Here. He's not here. So let's just talk about him just for a minute so we know who the other author is, because he's part of this story.
That's very true. And just practically speaking, it is difficult to write a book, and it is also further difficult to co-author if you aren't both completely committed to the topic. And so this is not the first book I had said I would write, but it is the first book that I did write. And I think that's thanks to Peter John's commitment and equal interest in the topic. So we have worked together either at the Institute of Marriage and Family Canada, also in Ottawa, then both moved over to Cardis. We've worked together.
With you?
Yeah, same. Yeah, because
okay.
the Institute of Marriage and Family Canada became part of Cardis. So that's part of our story. And then this is like almost 20 years ago. So we've known each other for a good long time. So
yeah. And how many people are at Cardis?
Just about 30 between two offices. One is in southwestern Ontario, Hamilton, and then an Ottawa office that's not too far down the road from Parliament Hill.
And so what currently are you guys concerned with at Cardis, or investigating, I could say?
Yeah. I mean, we're very concerned with childcare. That's been a driving interest. I think that interest will probably stop doing as much research on it in the coming months, simply because the election results indicate that the Liberals are going to continue to fund the current plan, and there's only so much you can say, I think, that isn't what you said before on that. But I'm continuing to work on that right now. We've looked at the agreements that the Canadian provinces have on childcare, whether they're fulfilling them. The short answer is they're not. That's work Peter John has done a lot of. I will actually do a look at quality in childcare, because I think that's an important piece of the debate that's been missing, actually. So I want to do a sort of neutral assessment of the history of quality and how it's been defined, and what it's a little bit politicized, the term quality. It means different things in different ages, from what I can tell so far in the daycare debate, specifically. So
right, I interviewed Erica Commissar, who talks a lot about birth to 3 years old, and so she talks about the necessity of a primary caregiver, so that the baby gets the same information back every time they reflect on whether their behavior is a reasonable, if they're moving in the right direction or not. But if the caregivers change all the time, then they have a hard time evaluating their own path forward.
Yeah, and she just also speaks beautifully to the powerful importance of mothers. And so, I mean, not to call you out or anything, but you use the word caregiver, which I frequently do as well. And it's actually Erica Commissar who has taught me, like, those first 3 years, mothers really matter. They're not interchangeable. We're not sort of irrelevant. And I think that's a very hard message to talk about, but an important message, and also should be like an optimistic, positive message as well. Like the work you do with a tiny baby can feel grueling in moments. Maybe you're sleep deprived. It's important for young moms, mothers of young children, to know that it's also very important. I think that lends weight to what you're doing, even when it's very difficult.
So let's go back then to marriage, because marriage comes before the baby.
Yeah, in theory.
No, well, ideally.
Ideally, yes, yeah.
And so we can talk about ideals and how we fall away from them, because nobody is perfect, right? But that doesn't mean there's no ideal. Just because we fall away from it doesn't mean there's no ideal. And so we'll talk about marriage in its ideal form, and how it has served us, and maybe how it's been misunderstood now, and also played with. It's played with, and now people aren't sure of the utility of it.
Right. Yeah. 100%. They're very unsure. They think it's sort of a nice thing, but not terribly necessary, I think, is the prevailing view for young people. So, and thanks for using the word ideal, because I think it's important to have those ideals in front of us, even when we all fall short in many instances, right? It doesn't mean that the ideal was wrong, because it was hard to achieve, which marriage is hard. So,
yes, marriage is hard. And, being a child is not easy either, but you have the ideal from your parents, at least. And if not your parents, well, then hopefully you have guidance from your grandparents or from neighbors, or like you have an example somewhere in the world that gives you a higher idea of what family represents. But the same as with marriage, is there's an ideal. There is an ideal, and we, for a very, very long time, it worked. So what happened?
Yeah, you're asking me how much time?
Yeah. In your opinion, like from your research, and maybe also from your experience, because you have got married and now have had a child, and so you have maybe an updated idea.
So what happened to marriage is the subject of the book, and the question mark in the title, I do ? We felt that was important because we weren't trying to set out a list of this, thou shalt believe this or that about marriage. We really are trying to encourage people to ask questions they may not have asked before. What is happening, what has happened to marriage is the driving question. And we see from the stats in the United States and Canada and the Western world that marriage is in decline. And then through our work at Cardis, we were accruing this knowledge of the importance of marriage, and it felt kind of like it was a secret, that there was a lot of mainstream secular research supporting marriage as an ideal, and that nobody knew about it except for me. And Peter John probably felt similarly, like this is not something that should be a secret from the public at large. What happened, I think, is the subject of many, many books and many different people you could interview. I do think two things. I think the sexual revolution really altered the way we do relationships, and that's a sort of foundational shift, a tectonic shift, a major shift. I think the advent of oral contraceptives and approved by the FDA in 1960 also was a technological shock that really rocked us, and will probably, that's a bell that won't be unrung. So we're going to be grappling with that for a long time to come, possibly always. I also think that, the groundwork for the sexual revolution came many decades before that. So it wasn't just that social problems in the families popped up in, 1960. You can see a lot of evidence of problems before that. But I do think that's a shock. The sexual revolution and a certain view of feminism, second wave feminism, piled on top of that, hitched its star to the sexual revolution, which it didn't need to do to support women's rights and to support women's equality. And in process also began denigrating marriage. I think all those things have had a significant effect on whether we view marriage as a normal part of the life script or not. That term life script doesn't really exist anymore. I think in a prior era, people kind of, without too much rumination, would do their schooling and get married after they were done, work and have kids. I think that's been lost, and we, for better or for worse, and there's always trade-offs, so good things and bad things, but each person is very individual now, atomized in a sense, and choosing their own life course and finding their way. And that is extremely hard to buck so far as it's the air we breathe and the culture we live in. And I do think of myself as being a person who I'm part of that life script. So like I got married very late, didn't necessarily feel like that was a choice per se, but it is what happened. And then had a child extremely even later. But, up until prior to that point, really just following the non-script that we have before us, which is to find yourself, pursue career, gain accolades in the places that people respect, which is not necessarily the family domain these days. Try to establish yourself, and those aren't bad things. I don't look back at my life at that time and say it was wasted. I don't think I was doing bad. I wasn't, couch surfing or wasting my time per se. I was working quite hard on issues that mattered. And, but at the same time, it was a one-sided look at how life should be. So I think that's the problem we face as a culture today. And it's going to take a huge monumental shift to sort of turn the ship around, as it were.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know what you think about this, but young women between 18 and 34 are, the liberal side of the spectrum are not getting married and having children.
Mm-hmm.
And they are also voting completely differently than men.
Mm-hmm.
So 50% of the population now is voting different, opposite to the other side, the other 50% of the population. And so that's also very interesting.
The gender divide, yes.
The gender divide, yeah, politically, as well as how we have become divided about marriage as well. And so we're not together in our formation of what that means as a decision.
This book came out this book came out a couple months ago, and I think it's almost been surprising to me that, as we talked about it to various audiences, a divide between men and women is a theme that has emerged again and again.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if men and women aren't, dating culture is in shambles. It's difficult to date. It is hard to find a partner. I think that in many different ways that is true, but also if, as you said, young women want dramatically different things or think they want dramatically different things, if, marriage is an experience good, they don't really know. But yeah, the stats also show that women are desiring, I think, to have kids less. And obviously, both men and women are getting married less, particularly where we live. So,
yeah, right. So this is a good thing to talk about, because there's definitely a societal shift here that has to be talked about. We have to talk about things to understand them, and to also to be informed, and then to find a path forward that is better than whatever path we're on that might not be of abundance. Because really, life is supposed to be of abundance. When you buy a bouquet of flowers, you don't buy them without the flowers. You want the abundance of the flower.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's nothing to look at. And so life is like that. Let's see what we can do to have a life of abundance. And not getting married, not having kids doesn't sound abundant to me.
It doesn't to me either, but I do sort of sympathize, I suppose, with young people who don't really know what to angle for. And I just recently heard, I believe it was Louise Perry speaking on a panel, and she was talking to, I think, an audience of young women about balancing work and motherhood. And she said, don't think about whether you want to have children at age 20 or 30 or 40. Think about what it'll be like to have to have no children at age 70 or 80 or 90,
or 50.
Or 50. Yeah, each decade would be presenting certain hardships, even loneliness. But I agree with her. Yes, do think about that. But it's almost impossible to tell my 30-year-old self or my 20-year-old self to think about those things, because at those ages, I personally was myopic and not able to imagine that. I was also raised without grandparents in my life, so I didn't have, I suppose, older people to go or to witness or like talk to, or I don't know. That's got to be a common Canadian experience, because so many people are children of immigrants. And only my parents came over. My grandparents were back in Europe. But yeah, I don't think my 30 or 20-year-old self could really grapple with that idea or think it through. And so it's one of the cruelties of life that then, yes, to be 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 and alone, you've done a lot of work already at that time. You know what it means to do work, and it may have even been the most meaningful work in the world, but it can't really compensate for feelings of loneliness or this aspect of your life that went unfulfilled. So
I don't know if you looked at this movie that just came out, the Disney movie, Snow White. We went to watch it just to see what they had created. And it was very, very interesting, I thought, because I know the Grimm's fairy tale. Yeah. I grew up with those fairy tales of Sleeping Beauty and Snow White and Pinocchio and all of those things. And it was very interesting to see how they portrayed it. And I wasn't really paying attention to the making of the movie. I knew that there was controversy at Disney because they had decided not to have any dwarfs. And so then there was some kerfuffle about that, because that's, integral to the story. So what's going on here? And then when they tried to put dwarves in it, then there was a famous actor whose name I don't remember, but he spoke up against hiring these dwarves in the role of dwarf. He didn't think that was correct. So they made them out of CGI.
Okay.
Right? So there are dwarves in the story, thank goodness. But anyway, and the way they portrayed them was also not in keeping with the Grimm's fairy tales, because in Grimm's fairy tales, the dwarves are kind of all the same. They're all the same height, for sure. They all kind of wear the same outfit.
Okay.
And they have the same job. They all go to work in the mines.
Right.
In the diamond mines. And they have a very clean house. They keep good house and they work. They're common men.
Okay.
Right? They're just common men. And Snow White, when she leaves the queen and has to run away from the huntsman who's supposed to bring her heart back to the queen, and the huntsman can't do it. He's a good man and he can't do it. And she runs off and she serves the common man. That's what she's doing there. And they accept her.
Yeah.
And they help her to become more informed about who they are as common men, and to be living there in gratitude with them. And they actually end up, when the evil queen comes and she puts a bodice on her that's too tight, so she over-sexualizes her to strangle her and kill her. And the dwarves save her from that. And then the old queen gives her a comb, a poisoned comb, like a narcissism type idea. And the dwarves save her from that. Her service to the dwarves saves her from that. But then when she swallows the poison apple, they can't save her. But they love her so much and revere her so much, they put her in a glass case. And then the prince comes, because he does. He comes by and he sees beauty, which is what he is naturally attracted to, is beauty. And she is so beautiful that no matter, even though she's not viable and doing anything other than being beautiful, he takes her with him. And in that process, he shakes the casket and the apple falls out and she lives. And he marries her because now she's marriable. So he marries her. So that's the story of the Grimm's fairy tale. But in this story, the dwarves, they don't keep a good house. Snow White has to teach them how to take care of their house. So she's not serving them. She's teaching them because they're not able, even though they've been perfectly able all this time before her, all of a sudden she shows up and she's way more knowledgeable than they are. And Dopey is portrayed more as the hero dwarf.
Okay.
Even though he's dopey, he's just bashful. There's a dwarf that's already bashful, but they give it to Dopey. He's bashful and he's not being paid attention to properly. So they pay attention to him properly and everything. And then he ends up leading the dwarfs.
Okay.
To help her to take on the queen. And there's this kind of bandit. There's a bandit with a merry man that lives in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of comes along with her too, but he's kind of he's in her, he's hoping for her, but he's not the prince. So he's not her savior or anything. She's the one who goes to the queen and faces the queen. And then the dwarves and the bandit and her celebrate, but there's no marriage at the end. So they get rid of a lot of the Grimm's fairy tale and a lot of the meaning in the fairy tale that teaches us women need to serve the common man to find their prince. And so we have an idea that women can do whatever they want. They can be whoever they want. They can take care of themselves. They can run their own lives. They don't need any help. They don't need a husband. And they can have a baby on their own. They don't need a husband. So this whole idea of the prince and the common man is pushed aside. And the evil queen is the one who sets this all up. And I would say in our society, there's some evil queen as well setting this all up. So it's not as if this isn't happening. This fairy tale. So even though we don't have grandparents around, even though our ancestors are not beside us, even though I'm not close to my grandkids and, every day, which would be better if I was, but I'm not, there are stories to tell us how to live our lives. But we're twisting those stories too. So we have to be really careful.
Right. That's so interesting, actually. I smiled when you mentioned Snow White only because right about the time that the modern movie came out, I rented or got from the library, actually, Snow White, the 1930s version for my daughter, which does stray from what you've described as the real Grimm tale. For example, the dwarves in that 1930s version don't keep a good house, and she does help them to clean it up, etc. But it is also wildly different from the modern thing, which I haven't seen. And I smile also because it would be kind of really nice to go out to movies on a regular basis. But these are some of the things that are small sacrifices in contrast with the joys of having my daughter in our lives. But yeah, we don't really do that. But yeah, there's what I understand of the modern version kind of, and I think I alluded to it in talking about what some of the first steps in pushing and pulling at marriage is second wave feminism deserves a lot of the blame in my view, because again, hitching your wagon to the sexual revolution star just absolutely didn't have to happen. It isn't something that was a foregone conclusion. There were many different feminists of different stripes duking it out over having a ideological disagreement over how to pursue women's rights. And we know who won the day, and they've sort of remained ascendant ever since. But it's not a reasonable view. And it's not well expressed when you read the primary sources. Oftentimes reading some of the second wave feminist primary sources is just absolutely chaotic, and there's no real point to it, and it's hard to even get at what they're angry about in some parts, right? Like, so, I mean...
Yeah, that's right, because how come they had the time to write? What gave them the time to write?
Well,
what were all the other women doing at that time?
Probably raising kids. Is that what you're getting at? Yeah.
On their own.
Yeah.
Like they were really in the thick of it.
And why were they so angry towards that pursuit is another, it's it's an extremely angry viewpoint, often the way it's expressed in the most strong terms possible, right? Like these are not, I think of myself as a reasonable person, right? Like I'm not saying marriage is for everyone, and I'm not actually claiming anything good comes out of a bad marriage. These are all, we have to talk about good marriages and the creation of good marriages to steward our 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 culture forward. But I mean, there's no nuance really for the second wave there. And that
No.
just continued, and it continues and it continues, and it filters, I think, into the way that we think or teach young women, even in far more reasonable settings. Like I didn't study women's studies. I just have caught up on some of that reading. But I do think that the idea of the autonomous woman is sort of a vestige of that era, and the idea you can do everything on your own, that you can be a mother, certainly was the vibe I got, but it's a sort of just going to happen. And other things are arguably presented as more important, certainly to achieve first, right?
Right. And that's
So
really got the cart before the horse.
to do it first, or to claim that these things have to be achieved first, to fail to see the lifespan stretching out in front of us that's decades and decades and decades long, in which we can do a great many things, that's short-sighted, to say the least.
Yeah.
And then, of course, your fertility doesn't stretch out over decades, and you can only experience a child, learn that it's great, then find out it's too late to have another, for example. This sort of thing happens. Certainly, the culture has shifted really far. I think one study Curtis did that has been really, really helpful in talking about having children. We surveyed women in Canada and asked about their fertility intentions, and learned that half of Canadian women have fewer children than they would have ideally desired to have. So when we talk about fertility, you have 50%, that's half of Canadian women, who relate to what I'm saying and then don't get a voice, fundamentally don't get a voice. They aren't allowed to express that. We aren't supposed to say that. Nobody really does. Political leaders, I don't hear it talked about very much. They'll probably be the last people to talk about it. And then I am Christian, so I've traveled in a lot of church circles where sometimes then the emphasis is so strongly on marriage and family that those who aren't able to participate in it or haven't feel excluded. So that's not a great phenomenon either. Basically, it's like, who's going to talk?
It's funny, though, when you have that baby, didn't you find that you were all of a sudden part of a new club that you didn't know was there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you were included? You were included because you had a child, and you weren't included because you didn't have a child. And that can't be any other way, because you don't know, because a baby is only a baby until it's your baby, and then it's your baby. And you can see the beauty and also the relationship and the vision and everything in this little baby, because it's your baby. And it's not that it's not a choice. It's not a choice. It's a natural affinity that we need to help the baby survive, right?
I do also think I was included in these new communities, and last night found myself on a cold park lawn with a group of 3 to 6 year olds playing t-ball. Like, these are great things you get to do, right?
Yes,
And
that's right.
honestly, so great. The level of enthusiasm in those children for this first time experience of hitting a ball with a big heavy stick. It was amazing. It's really cute, like just so fun.
Yes.
But that kind of thing, ideally, in my ideal version of the world that doesn't quite exist, would be open to the community who lives around the park, and maybe people who don't have kids or their grandparents. They wander over, right? Like, it shouldn't be exclusively a child. You have a child and now you're in a club.
But it is a club. It's called the Parent Club. It just is.
You have things to talk about with those people.
I was 31 when I had my first child, and my sisters are older than me, 7 and 5 years older than me, quite a bit older than me. And so they already had kids, and all my sister said is, you're going to be amazed, because when you have your baby, you're going to find yourself in a club. And I had no idea, because we were living in Montreal, no parents around, just graduate students, so nobody even of another generation, really, just us. But we were living in a part of Montreal that was Portuguese and Italian and French. And we would go to little diners for breakfast. And even when we had our baby at the beginning, you can go to diners because you just have a little baby and the baby will sit there with you. They're portable.
Yeah.
But the other people who we saw every morning in this diner, one was a very big, burly French, worker. He was a working guy, and he was sitting in the stall beside us, and we sat down. And he turned around and he goes, "Coochie, coochie, coochie," and I never would have heard that from him if I wasn't part of this group, right?
Oh, that's funny.
And it was and I'd been sitting there with him for months, maybe a year, and we'd never even said hello. But now, because he probably had his own kids, and he felt this affinity to us now that we had children. That's just the way it goes. It's
in our
natural.
community, it's the people with pets you talk to. It's the smokers you talk to. They're outside on their front porch. And then kids. We have kids. You can talk to people in the parks. But otherwise, it's true. Prior to that, I am not a smoker. I have no pets. And for much of my life, I had no child. So it's really isolating in that sense. And, as an adult, if you hang out in a park and you don't have a kid, there's other problems. It looks weird. You probably shouldn't do that, right? So, there's aspects of community life. When I lived in Germany for a summer as a student, this is like back in high school, they had a different milieu for socializing entirely. And it did involve intergenerational socializing in a town square in a sort of small to medium-sized German town in Bavaria. That I think that's the vision I'm angling for, that I have sort of seen a little snapshot of. But in spite of having that vision, it's not like Germans are bucking the low birth rate either. So we're all in a similar boat. Starting with marriage and then not having kids. It's funny. I've often been accused of being conservative because I am. But when you talk about these things like marriage, it still is correlated. Marriage and children are correlated. People want to, if they don't want to have marriage, they definitely want something that looks a whole lot like it before they have kids, right? It's just intuitive. You don't want to be with some joker who's not sticking around to have a child. You want to be, people know this. So
yeah, women are choosy maters.
It's not just a sort of conservative supposition of how the world ought to be. It is, and it's a reality, I think.
Apes,
desire.
Female apes will mate with any male ape, but people aren't like that. We are choosy maters. Women choose their mate, and so we're different. We're different species for sure, and it isn't. It's exclusionary too. We decide who that's going to be. And we do try to find our prince. We try to find someone who will provide and who will stay and who will be kind to us and our baby when we're vulnerable. So we're looking for that type of person. And if we can't find that type of person per se, but we can, have some sort of attraction to one another, a feeling that maybe this is a good idea, we can search out to see if this person is dependable, and if this person has who their community is and all of that. And so we can gauge them in different ways about whether they're going to be a person who we can bond with and really share our deepest needs with, because having a baby is a very deep and vulnerable situation, and we have to choose wisely for sure. But that's how you make a good man.
Yeah.
You don't just find a good man. My husband, I had to wait. I had to wait to marry him. He had to grow up quite a bit, but we're the same age, right? So I grew up before him. I matured before him. And so I watched him from afar kind of get more and more responsible. And I probably waited too long because I was just about 30 I was 27 when I married him. And it still took me a while to have a baby after that. So I should have married him probably earlier than that. But even knowing him for so long, I had met him when I was 8 years old. So I knew him my whole life. But like I said, he was a year younger than me. So that's the thing. Women are looking for men. They're looking for someone responsible for sure, because this is a dicey decision to put
Yeah.
yourselves in someone else's hands. Really, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and the way you describe it actually speaks to another theory I have, is that women have a lot more power than we've been told. We have a decision-making power, and we have a formative power, and we can, you can fundamentally make that decision about who you do or do not marry. But I feel like most women don't view them like again, not well, yes, I was gonna say not to slam second wave feminists, but I am. They present that victim mentality so consistently that then women aren't really aware of the extent to which they can teach, they can form, they do have power. And even in the vulnerability and the dependence of that early, say you have a child and it is very vulnerable. But like it's a bit of a lie to suggest that women are victims and have no control or have no power. I think
Especially when they're the choosers.
especially that, yeah. And especially when men are, I think, looking to women for some of that, guidance, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to relinquish that and to play a victim, is it's a real loss of, it can lose you those to live an abundant life. You can lose out on that, really.
Well, I wonder, if young women grow up without a good male model, then they're not going to know that when they're looking who to look for in a husband.
That's true. Yeah, the
And
modeling
now
factor.
there's many single mothers. Where do they find their male model from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the things we say in the book is that marriage is caught and not taught. So I was asking you earlier, do you wish your parents said more? I don't think they needed to, or we can brainstorm all the different ways in which to encourage a healthy culture of marriage. But simply living out a healthy marriage is itself a way of teaching about it. But if
Yeah.
you don't have that in front of you and you don't see that role modeled, I think it does become more difficult to catch the vision.
I think it's really, I think it's be a huge challenge then to understand what it is without, I was saying this morning that when I was young and just married, I renovated our house because we bought a derelict house not far from University of Toronto campus, and it didn't even have electricity upstairs. Like, it wasn't livable. The place wasn't livable. And my husband said, well, I don't have any time. You do it. So I became the contractor and hired everybody and brought home all the wood and everything else in my car. I worked for 6 months and built a house. And now my kids are married and have children, and they have built their houses. And so you don't even know. I didn't know. My kids were just in kindergarten when I rebuilt that first house. But then I renovated the house a couple more times because I didn't do a very good job the first time. But they learned that it's important to try to make a home a hospitable place so that you can have friends in, and you can be a family with feel a sense of worth in your family, that you're willing to sacrifice your time to make it beautiful, so that they can see what beauty is. Even if you haven't gone to church, so you haven't seen what beauty really is, but you can see kind of a facsimile of it at home if you can make it an abundant place for them. And I had no idea that my kids would take on these kinds of jobs with no question. Oh, that's what you do. Oh, wow, that's what you do. You had learned that. I didn't mean to teach you that, really, not outwardly. I wasn't saying this is how you do this and this is how you do that. That wasn't it. So we teach our kids. We definitely teach our kids with everything we do, everything. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about, you're talking about marriage. I'd like to talk a little bit about husbands and wives and how to make that work.
Hmm. Well, based on what you just said, I was thinking about how one of the themes I return to in writing again and again is that the idea that the creation of a happy home is itself work, and somebody does it, even if you outsource it. You either choose to because you don't like it, or you must. But somebody needs to do that, and everybody values it, like the end result of a happy, comfortable, clean, cozy home, whatever it is. But somehow the work of actually doing it, unless you're Martha Stewart, isn't perceived as being terribly valuable. And I'm not talking about Martha Stewart levels of perfection, needless to say, but simply just that idea of a happy, cozy home and the work that's involved there, that it is work, that it's valuable, and that it takes
Mhm.
time. Yeah, I think that's
And it takes negotiation between the husband and the wife.
sure, and constant negotiation and a family view of you're not an independent, autonomous individual. You're somebody who is dependent, whether you acknowledge it or not. And how are you going to work that out within your families? If we could make a little bit more peace with dependence, healthy, as I think we would have a healthier society. Not that we're codependent or forcing others to do our work for us, but this idea that we are autonomous individuals is, alongside the feminist revolution and sexual revolution, probably the driving force of people thinking they don't need anybody else, or that it's too
Yeah,
much of a hassle,
yeah.
or they don't want to sacrifice whatever it is they have for a different vision. So,
What is
um,
a woman? We've come to what is a woman? And why are we asking that question? What is a woman? Like, really, what even brought that question up?
oh boy,
I've thought about that. Have you thought
yeah.
about that? Yeah.
I think some of my answers would go a bit in circles. So you better,
Well,
yeah.
I
What
just
did you
think of
think?
Mother Mary as being the first mother, 2,000 years ago. That's the woman was the mother. And so now we're trying to define a woman separate from a child, and we can't do it. We don't know how to do it. It's because really to mature and grow old and become wise, it's really helpful if you serve your family and
Mm,
and learn how to be the best hostess you can be, to be hospitable to your husband and your kids and your neighbors, and like to walk that straight and narrow path of service.
mm.
And that's been lost, hey? That's been lost.
Yeah. Well, and in mentioning Mary, the mother of God, you're touching on another aspect of decline in our society, which is the decline of religiosity, which was primarily Christian religiosity in North America. And I think that dovetails in with the decline in other institutions like marriage, um, because the church was once a tremendous source of support for marriage and a place to get married and a place of teaching and community. And so the decline of marriage certainly dovetails in with the decline of faith,
But
really.
people are going back to the church, don't you think? Have you
Yes,
seen
they
any of
are.
that?
So
Yeah.
there's always tremendous hope on that side, I think.
Young
Um,
men are going back to church. There's stats on that. And I imagine women will follow. They haven't, I don't know that they have yet, but I imagine that they'll follow.
yeah, I don't know what the stats say, but I mean, I'm tremendously encouraged. There are very vibrant churches. There is, you know, I am Christian. I fundamentally believe in that hope. But for how our society has gone now and how we don't value marriage as much, and there isn't as much support for marriage, that's something that goes hand in hand with a decline in faith, I think.
Yeah, well,
Um,
if you're not defining an ideal, I think it's very difficult to aspire to anything. And when you lose the religiosity, then you lose the ideal, and then it's hard to envision what would be something to strive for.
And if you have to be constantly creative on basic aspects of life today, coming down even to like your own gender, for example, like that's something some would put forward as a choice. I mean, that's an exhausting way to live,
Mhm.
utterly exhausting, deplete any additional resources that you may have. Um, how can you focus on serving another in a marriage if you can't figure out who you are?
Well, that's
Um,
just way too much attention to yourself, and there's psychological evidence that the more time you spend thinking about yourself, the more anxious and depressed you become.
Yeah, yeah. I have thought, I mean, I think a younger version of myself would have thought that you mature as you age, but I don't think that's actually true. I think circumstances need to be coming into your life to mature you. And one of those circumstances are like a route to finding yourself has to be marriage. It has to be children. Family and marriage have to be key ways of self-actualizing, as it were. Um, it's just ironic because when you ask young women, as we did, why they're not having children, their number one reason is basically they need to find themselves first. They need to mature more. So there's this pinnacle they're hoping to achieve and hoping to finally arrive at when everything else in life is perfect. And that, for many people that point doesn't come. And others, it comes very late. And so hence delayed marriage and no marriage and declining marriage, right?
Yeah.
And hence also a class divide on marriage.
Social
Sorry?
media. Social media. Women on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, on used to be Tumblr, like in
Mm,
all these ways that women are competing online and looking at themselves in relationship to others, trying to find perfection that way, right? That's not
that's
that's that's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that's a losing game for
It's a
sure.
losing game. Yeah, obviously it is though, because you're just not going. It's not. First of all, well, it's two-dimensional. It's on social media, so it is two-dimensional.
Mhm.
It's like reading the comics. And so are you going to aspire to be one of the characters in the comic strip in the New York Times? I don't think so. And that's about as deep as it is online. So that's not very deep. It's not a very mature place to look for guidance.
Oh, goodness me, no.
Right?
Honestly. Social media and the advent of social media and the constant using of a device is easily the bane of my existence and something I hope to keep out of my daughter's life for as long as possible. We
Yeah.
just keep telling her these phones are for adults. These are adult tools. These are not for you. But already they're definitely very user friendly.
Yes, they
Those
are
those
user-friendly.
devices.
Well, there are some people who are trying to develop phones that don't have social media on them.
The really boring ones, yeah, I love
I
it.
think those are great. I think those are great. I think and those it's very interesting. It's like Lent, what are you gonna give up? How about you give up all social media and see what happens? The first Lent I went through when I joined the church, the Catholic Church, was, I gave up playing solitaire on my phone because I
Huh.
thought, "What can I give up this Lent?" And then I started to read more. So you think that you're not doing this thing very much, that it's not really impeding on your time. But if you give it up, then you'll see. You won't know otherwise.
Yeah, you'll get books on your nightside table, and they'll pile up, and you'll read them. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. No.
Yeah.
That's probably, like, I mean, I think that, to return to a marriage conversation, just the advent of dating apps on your phone, that type of way of quote unquote connecting, it hasn't worked. It's not like it is actually bringing people into long-term happy relationships. Um, so yeah,
Well,
and I
the
think it's
universities are at fault there too, right? Because the universities have fallen by the wayside in so many ways, and in bringing men and women together, they have uh, they haven't encouraged they haven't encouraged that. In fact, they've discouraged it.
what the actual dating and relationships. I
Yeah.
mean, I think they, not outside of universities, but everywhere, you know, if you talk about, if you look at how some people are coming together, and then of course you had the Me Too movement and tons of abuse happening, and then contracts to sign before any relationship can evolve, and consent contracts and this sort of thing, like it's an incredibly low bar and also exhausting. I mean, this type of approach to to a relationship isn't, I don't think it's not bringing a lot of men and women happiness of a lasting kind. So
No, all these contracts and stuff, that's not trying to find trust and truth and respect. That's not what those contracts are about. They're about protectionism, protecting yourself against predator, and that's not a healthy point of view.
if you can't trust somebody, then you fundamentally need them to sign on the dotted line, and even that wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I think in the book we have a section on marriage is not a contract, because you cannot delineate in a contract all the things that happen over the life course in a marriage. So I guess that raises the question of what is it? And a Christian might say it's a covenantal relationship or a sacramental relationship, or a sacrament. But at the basic level, you can at least discuss in secular terms that it isn't a contract. It's not to be thought of in the terms of like, if, we write this all down and you're going to, you couldn't find a contract to cover all the aspects of a marriage over the course of a lifetime. So a shift in thinking about how marriage unfolds, could start there as well, right? We're not signing a contract when we enter into an ideal of aspiring to be together for a lifetime. I do have to say, though, I'll confess freely, like here and elsewhere, that we talk about marriage today as having evolved into this soulmate model where it's all about the feelings and the romance and the self-actualization. And in juxtaposition to that, we want to introduce or reintroduce, bring back an institutional model of marriage, and one that brings together many more aspects of life in a more fulsome institutional framework. But, talking about learning from people and things that are caught and not taught, in my lifetime, I don't think I've seen that. No-fault divorce was legalized and made mainstream in the 60s across the continent. And that broke down the longevity factor of marriage. So I guess my point is, when you haven't ever seen an institutional marriage or what that might look like, it becomes more difficult to advocate strongly for it, in spite of the fact that I just wrote a book to do so. Because the picture is a little bit fuzzy around the edges of what all exactly that entails and means, particularly in a secular context, which is how we wrote the book for people of any faith or no faith at all.
So how would you define institutional marriage then, basically?
Yeah, it's long-term. It's not short-term. It's the foundational part of your life. It's not what you do when you're completely perfect and your life is all perfect. It's the it's joining together of economic, spiritual, financial situations, sexual situations. It's the joining together of all those factors into one union that lasts for life. There's trends towards separate bank accounts today. That's not representative of an institutional marriage. There's even trends towards separate homes in marriage, people who get married and then live in different cities. So you're really not creating a picture there of a family as a building block, or as the partnership as the building block of something new. It's not being defined as something generative, procreative, and meshed together in every possible way. We really kind of pursue marriage these days as a lifelong divorce negotiation. I think Wendell Berry wrote that once in one of his essays, and I really related to that, because I think the soulmate model is kind of like, I'll do this with you, but I keep myself here, and don't touch that part of my life or else, kind of thing.
That's a recipe for divorce.
And that negotiation multiplied over and over and over and over again. One symptom of that kind of consideration of marriage I see is the constant ruminations and Statistics Canada gathering data on who does what in the house, and parsing out women doing more housework. And trust me, I am certainly not unsympathetic to how much work is done in the house, and whether I have on any given day maybe gotten frustrated with my husband, like, you clean the bathroom this time. But I don't view parsing it out like hour by hour, minute by minute as a sort of institutional approach to marriage. I don't think on the flip side they're examining all the work that men do to support, for example, or provide finances. It's a it's a sort of one-sided view that if you haven't gotten equal everything in housekeeping, then you couldn't possibly have a healthy marriage. I mean, those are just symptoms of the problem, but
I think that what they're looking for is negotiation, marital negotiation, which has to happen 90 minutes a week. Like there's a lot of negotiation that goes into staying married and having a good marriage. And there's always something coming up, and it might be something that's come up between you, but it might be just something that's come up in the wife's life or the husband's life. And if you don't talk about them to a point, and when you talk about things that you are concerned with, there's going to be tension because it's something you don't understand. Naturally, that's going to bring tension too, because you have some thing that you need to bring up that you haven't figured out. Well, that's why you have this spouse to talk to, is because supposedly and traditionally we've already decided we're staying together. And so that means that you can discuss difficult things and not worry that the other person is going to scoot down the block and never come back again. So because you've made what you said was a covenantal agreement, means that you can talk about anything and the other person isn't going to leave.
Right. And that
right?
opens things up to discussing
And
hard
you
things.
need that. Yeah, absolutely. You need that. But you don't get close without those conversations.
Yeah.
You just get further and further apart. And eventually you discuss your problems in divorce court, which is a little late.
It's too late. Yes. The signposts have to be earlier. I remember having a conversation with a group of women, and one woman was essentially complaining about what you might call the emotional load. That was the term that was coined not too long ago by scholars for women who are carrying so much about appointments and, keeping the peace in the home and getting kids and buying the groceries and making the Halloween costumes. Anyways, this woman was complaining a lot about that. And, a bunch of us were sort of like, have you talked to your husband? She was not a single mother, right? So not to rest in the zone of complaining, but to actually negotiate it with your partner and not expect perfection on a day-to-day basis might have been helpful in her case.
Absolutely. Jordan and I, when I had my first baby, I was 31, as I said, and we had been married for, I think, 3 or 4 years by then. And he was still a graduate student, although I think he was in his postdoc, so he'd finished his PhD. And he was applying for other jobs when I got pregnant. And I was not worried about financial disaster. I had faith in my husband. I had faith in my husband that I could have a baby, and that for the time that I was going to be on bed rest, really, kind of, because you're in the bed with the baby at the very beginning, that I could do that, and I didn't even need extra money because I could find hand-me-downs for the baby to wear, and all the baby needed was my breast milk and some diapers. So it wasn't even a big financial hit, except for that I wasn't going to be bringing in any money, right?
Right.
And
right.
But I was totally fulfilled by having this baby. It was full-time work, right? Oh, more than full-time work. It's really a lot of work because you have to be up at night, so you lose your sleep. So then you have to kind of sleep in the day when you can. And it's just, you don't even notice the season go by because you're very, very busy. I can remember that, not seeing spring. All of a sudden it was summer and I was like, oh, wow. I had this baby in January and now it's summer. Oh, wow. It was intense. But it wasn't very long. I bet it was 3 months after we were married. George came home one day and he said, Tam, you're not giving, I don't have any attention. I'm getting lonely. And I was like, you know what? I'm not lonely. I'm not lonely. I am busy and I am physically fulfilled with the suckling of this baby and this constant body-to-body contact that you have at the beginning. I don't feel any necessity for any more intimacy. But I said, I listened to my intuition and I thought, what is my husband saying here? And he's lonely. And I thought, well, let's see, what can I offer? Which is like, who knows why I did that? Because I was overtired and and up to here, but here's my husband. And he said, but you know what? I married my husband, and we had a covenant together to continue to be married. And I said to him, I don't know. I said, maybe we have to schedule dates because I just don't see this happening. Because I'm too busy and I can't see being spontaneous in any way. And he was kind of disappointed. He's like, schedule dates? That takes all of the mystery and everything out of the pursuit kind of thing. And I'm like, well, that's all I've got. That's all I've got.
I think it sounds reasonable, but
doesn't it? Yeah, schedule it or see you in 6 months kind of thing. So we pursued it. We negotiated it. We negotiated it, and it took us a few months to get it right. But I tell you, now we've been married for 36 years, and we still have dates.
Nice.
And we still schedule them because people have busy lives. And, at the beginning of every date, I have to tell him what's on my mind about the marriage. Maybe he's leaving his dirty socks in a ball in the corner all the time, and I just want him to put them in the laundry basket or something. Yeah. But it comes up when we want to have a date. Whatever is between us that hasn't been negotiated comes up. And he used to worry that I wouldn't have a date with him because I was sidelining. I was deflecting the main idea, which was to have a date. But he learned over time, it took a long time, he learned that if he listened and negotiated, then those things were gone, then we could actually have a date and we could communicate. But that initial communication about the household has to be done first. So if you don't do that, if you just go to a women's group and complain about your husband and don't go home and have a conversation with him that's going to be contentious and might take a few days actually to figure out. So it might be uncomfortable until you say what you need and he says what he needs and you find a middle ground. If you don't do that, then you will not find intimacy, not easily, not in the biblical way, which is a balanced way, where you both come together.
Yeah. You can't have a fake coming together where actually what I really want to talk about is that you left your socks on the floor. That's not really fun for your date night. So these things need to be
right away. Talk about it right away.
Actually, I'm learning just a lot from you. I know that when we've gone around talking about this book and the audience is really, it's quite specific insofar as we're talking about marriage as a public good. We're talking about marriage as building up civil society. I'm particularly passionate about marriage as I do some work with child welfare and children's aid. And so total absence of healthy relationships in those communities. And so really talking about marriage as a way to mitigate some of those problems, like pressing social issues that we see. So fine, I think that's a really valuable pursuit. But then people will ask me, be like, how do you have a good marriage? I'm like, I don't know. You tell me. You're probably married longer than I am anyways. And people definitely ask that. So actually promoting the book has been really interesting and has been optimistic points, like people coming and saying that it helped them to feel like there's a purpose undergirding why they bother to stay together. That was one couple. They were Christians. They were together. And I think mainly happily married in the way that any normal couple would go through ups and downs, but just found it sort of vindicating or edifying, that's the word, to learn about all the things that marriage is doing outside of their private lives. And I've come to see marriage as being this tiny little miracle, really, like in a culture, in a country where divorce is common. I look around our neighborhood and lots of intact families and living in wildly different ways. But two parents in the home, there when their kids get home. And I look at that as a little miracle because they're doing something very valuable and their children will profit by it and they are profiting by it. And I don't ever do this to my neighbors, but I sometimes feel like encouraging them, being like, this is amazing what you're doing. You're raising your son. You're still together, all these things, right? Actually, I think we have had some conversations like that, hopefully not sounding weird, but just encouraging. But yeah, like where the public meets the private.
Everybody needs encouragement.
True enough.
And they don't, it's surprising how little encouragement people need, but they actually need encouragement. George, I travel with him on this book tour, and people have read his books and looked at his YouTube videos and everything, and they come up to him. I think 8 people came up to him last night saying, you helped my son, you helped my husband. Thank you very much. And George says, how are they different? Oh, they negotiate. They are more manly. They stand up. They stand up for me and my children. They encourage, and these ways that we've just lost the narrative behind the reason, and it's not working. And I think we're so sophisticated now, at least in our thought, we have to understand all these stories and the necessities, because we think there's so much information we think we understand, but we actually don't understand until we do it. And then until we ask other people, how do you do this?
Yeah. Yeah. Today is a day to encourage people, like to grab hold of that is never wrong. One other category of surprise appreciation for the book has come actually from divorced mothers, of whom we've had a couple come and say they bought the book for their kids because through life circumstances that they didn't choose or appreciate, they needed to get divorced, and now their children were viewing marriage negatively. And I was particularly relieved and happy to hear that was something that they would do, because we do take this, I think, hands-off, non-judgmental approach to the issue. It's just deeply, obviously, so much pain, tied up into marriage and how we think about marriage. And everybody has the negative example in their life to look at. But yeah, to choose to buy that and sort of bolster the institution of marriage for kids who were struggling after a divorce, I thought, well, if that could have any of that kind of impact, then that would be encouraging to me. So I was encouraged by them telling us that. Truly. Yeah.
Well, Jordan, we were sitting having dinner on an outside patio, and a young woman came up, beautiful young woman, single woman, and she stopped and she said, "Oh, Dr. Peterson." She said, "I don't want to bother you. Everybody's always very kind and respectful. I don't want to bother you. You're having dinner. I don't want to bother you." She said, "But I listened to your interview with Joe Rogan the other day, and you were talking about narcissism." And she said, "I realized that I've been choosing men who were in it for themselves. And I've gone back to church to find a husband."
Well, there you go.
And I was like, that's the right idea.
And guess what? In church, they may present the idea of a vocational pursuit. And, the Catholic Church in particular has a strong sense of vocation for people who do not get married, and service of God. I mean, putting first things first never harms our path or our relationships.
No, it brings it alive, actually.
It nurtures them and brings out the very best that we have to offer. So, and not that I don't wish that if this young woman wishes to get married, that I hope she does, but
I hope she does too.
I think women in the church often have, they have sources of encouragement and meaning that secular people may not have, making the family pursuit even more important and a source of meaning for people who are non-religious. So it would be a real shame if we kind of viewed marriage as being it is a religious institution, but if we viewed it exclusively as a religious institution, it's accessible to everyone, and that's the beauty of it. But it may be that
we all have to live in the world. There's no doubt about it. Our everyday lives in our homes are ours to decide what we're going to do with, and really finding the right incentive. And so that's the right intention. You don't want the intention to be money, and you don't want the intention to be power, and you don't want the intention to be right over your husband and him wrong. You don't want that. You want to find a pathway forward that is brings you both more understanding and more vision for the future, more incentive to be in service to one another, at the least, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Service as a path to power is also a waning concept, probably partnering with waning religiosity. Like Jesus is the one who said the first shall be last, the last shall be first. Those concepts aren't, they're not the driving concern in, say, on Parliament Hill or Capitol Hill. So that the last should be first.
Yeah. But really, our children, we definitely, once we have them, we put them first. Both the mom and the dad puts them first.
Yes. Oh my. And how?
Right?
I'm going to have to be, after this conversation, being more consistent for having date nights ourselves
Yeah, you
over
have to
here.
have date nights, and your daughter has to learn that that's the time for mom and dad to be together. And
Yes.
that has to happen, and it has to happen every week, because it'll
Oh,
just fall
goodness.
away if it doesn't. It'll just fall away. The first time we had a date, we slept because we were tired. But it's a
Also, the
time that
relevance of it all.
well, we just agreed. What does a date mean? Well, we're not gonna talk on our phone to other people. Well, that's one thing it means. We're not gonna answer the door,
Mhm.
unless it's the fireman. We're not gonna answer the door. We're not going to schedule a call during that time, because that's our time. So
Mhm.
it's just our time to do, and we'll negotiate what happens. Maybe we'll go out to dinner, if we don't have to be home with our kids. But, we didn't have any grandparents around. We were at home for every date,
Okay.
just in our living room. So, Jordan lit the candles and fluffed the pillows and put some music on, and, I cleaned myself up and put on something nice and came and we'd dance. And we didn't know how to dance, but
Oh,
we
that's
learned to
fun.
dance. And now it's been 36 years and we have such a good time dancing together now. We've learned
It's
over the years
amazing.
how to dance together. Yeah. So, even that, what could be better than that? You get to dance with your husband. I think I think women love to dance. Don't you think?
Well, I do. I do also know that in spite of having quite a happy marriage, we are like two left feet together. So
Oh, you got to
perhaps
practice. You got to
perhaps we can
practice.
check back and see if anything there can be.
Oh, yeah. Well, Jordan, when I first took a dancing lesson with him, he took a step that was at least 3 of my steps, and it was like, this isn't gonna quite that's not quite how we're gonna do it."
This
But I
is not
danced
going to
with my
work.
dad, so I learned how to dance with my father, and that was helpful to me, and no one in his family danced, so he didn't know how.
So what
But
kind of dancing are we talking about
I
here?
think kind of like ballroom dancing, kind of.
Okay.
Or at least, well, he learned not very long ago that it's a kind of a push and pull towards, so where each other is going on the dance floor, and he's just
Mhm.
learned that.
A
So he's having
metaphor.
a lot of fun with that. Yeah, that's for sure.
Mhm. Mhm. All right, well, check back. I'll send you an email if we ever have a successful dance 'cause
Well, at least what you can do is put on music that you both like, and
Yes.
that's enjoyable,
Yes, yes,
and you
indeed.
can stand up. You can stand up together
Yeah.
and see what happens.
Yeah.
That's all we do, really. We stand up together and see what happens.
Excellent advice. Just stand up together and see what happens.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, and, and before we dance, I have to talk about all the things that are bugging me about our relationship, but luckily we do that weekly, so there's not very much. There's not very much.
Well, it must get easier over time. I mean, I would hope
It
anyways that you
does.
sort
It gets
of
way easier.
eradicate.
When I first got married, I didn't understand what it was all about, and I would often get upset about something, and I wouldn't know what I was upset about, and so it would take me 3 days
Hmm.
to figure out what it was, but it was good because we were committed to each other, and so we decided that if there was something here, we would figure it out, and so we
Mhm.
would at least give each other the benefit of the doubt that we were trying to tell the truth even though we didn't have a clue,
Mhm.
and that in good faith, we would try. And, I would go to sleep at night, and often my dreams would tell me
Hmm.
something that
Hmm.
would help me to at least bring it a little bit further forward so I could unravel this kind of mystery that
Hmm.
probably came from my parents and their parents. And like, who knows how far back the misunderstandings in marriage can come from.
Right.
But we can find those things if we decide that we want to tell the truth and we want to negotiate, to find play. Because if you're just saying, yeah, okay, I'll go along with it, that's not negotiation. You have to say,
No.
right? You have to get to a point where you're looking at him like the first time you met him.
I do wish in our culture this would be one cultural change toward improving the private relationship that is marriage. But I think it still has a fair bit of stigma if you're going to go forward and ask somebody for a marital counselor, for example. I think that should be considered routine and normal. You got somebody it could be a professional counselor, a psychologist, or it could be a trusted friend or a priest or a pastor. But like somebody to speak into your marriage should not be considered strange or like your marriage is on the rocks. It's simply like checking in on your car and getting a tune-up. And you know that you're hitting certain roadblocks and it's doing damage, but you don't know how to get around them. Like, I don't know. I think that's just perfectly normal. And oftentimes people don't quite realize how normal it is. And that is then cause for distance between people because they think that they are unusual because it's like they're doing normal relationship things and hitting normal relationship roadblocks. But the Hollywood romance image is one of perfection and perfect smiling happiness at all times.
Yeah, that's a lie because marriage is sacrifice and suffering. A lot of it is sacrifice and suffering with moments of joy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's better than no moments of joy. And there is joy. There can be joy in a marriage. And so the thing is to not want to win, because if you win, then your spouse loses. So that's no good. You want to learn to listen. So it's a really good practice of listening when you first get married. You have to listen to your spouse, find out who they are, and find out if you can listen without having to interchange and talk about yourself. So it's better to listen and just let go of whatever it is that you have to say, right? In practice, because you're going to have to listen to your kids because they're going to tell you who you are if you're lucky. You know what? By the time my kids got to be grade 9 or so, they were deep into their friend relationships, and in the morning we had a little dog and I would walk my son to the bus that was only 3 blocks away and he would tell me a little bit about his day. And that was the way that we actually still kept in contact because it's not easy, but you got to be there because your teenagers only talk to you when it's appropriate for them to, and they don't answer to your schedule.
Right.
That's why you got to be around. My older sister said, I think it was more important that I was around for my teenagers than when they were little.
Yes, I have heard that for sure, 100%. So I'm not at that stage yet, but I do think on marriage and family norms, kind of the idea that you can certainly with marriage just continue on with your life as it was before, but with children, things do change, I think, more dramatically. And oftentimes we're unprepared for that in many different ways. Financially, we're unprepared for it, right? People lock into massive mortgages and then cannot, wiggle their way out of it and are stuck spending less time with their family than in many instances they even desire. But yeah, I think things do change with children and the amount of time just, developing. It's different when you have a 6-year-old than a 12-year-old or a 18 or whatever. But
well, once they become 18, they can work. And so they have even 12. I think I started working when I was 12, delivering newspapers or babysitting or cleaning the theater downtown. So I started working. I was working in the swimming pool by the time I was 14 and then a lifeguard by the time I was 16 and running the swimming pool by the time I was 18 and then I left home. So, you can be a part of society, a child really by the time they're 12 years old. They start to take on responsibilities within their reach. And it's good because they learn what that means and then they have more respect for their mom and dad.
If you think about that in the context of what you just described, and then I look at my own life and like working and sort of, even at age 30 thinking I was just out of university, which was not true at that point. I don't know. I think that we do stretch out that time of formation, that time of like before we become adults in the society is an incredibly long period of time.
It
There's a
is. It's
lot
way
of
too
room to
long.
go off the rails, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
And then,
When do you think what should we do? Should we get married young?
well, one of the, I think, surprise trends really pulling apart at marriage is just delayed marriage because you're
Mhm.
not settling down and you're moving through like so many choices and sort of instability and a lot of pain and heartache comes with that.
Mhm.
I've met people who their kids are in a dating relationship. It's happy, it's secure. That everybody, the family, all likes it, and then the parents will be like, "But they can't get married." And they're like, "They're too young." They'll say, but the kids are like 21, 22. I think at that point, something's got to flip a switch where you're like, okay, I'm uncomfortable with this because of how I was raised. And, I got married super late. But
Yeah.
really, what's wrong with it? What are
Mhm.
you asking of them? You should be just living in limbo for an extended period of time. Like, just name it. I do think, earlier marriage would be one small step toward rejuvenating a marriage culture if we were able to normalize that a bit more.
I
Then on the,
agree. I
you know,
agree. Mhm.
in Christian, settings then I've spoken before churches, and then sometimes there's the parents will be looking at me and they're like, "How early are we talking here? My 18-year-old has been dating someone for 2 years. Too soon, too soon." Everybody has a point at which they feel that they're uncomfortable with it, but certainly the age of marriage has been getting older and older, and I think it leaves too much time for this process of maturation that doesn't need to take that much time, and too many mistakes are made and,
Well,
false
there's so many
starts.
time to make. Do you have so much time to make mistakes? If you got married at 21 and you're definitely ready by then physiologically to get married, maybe psychologically, and often, women find an older boyfriend that's maybe 3 years older or something, so they're more, um, used to being adults than maybe the woman is because she's younger, but if, say, you get married at 21, then what does that do? The mistakes you make within your marriage. Well,
Mhm.
at least there's not as many pitfalls, so you're in a much safer situation to make mistakes if you're married,
Yeah.
and then there is your husband who is there also as a bulwark from the world,
Mm.
and that's what marriage is really it's a buttress again you need buttresses to hold up the marriage. I think that's the institutional marriage, right?
That's yeah, yeah.
You need, the buttresses of, um, the covenant. So you have the covenant, first of all, and you have your community that it came to the wedding, so they buttress your marriage, and what other buttresses do you have?
By buttresses, you mean like institutional forces hedging you in and keeping you kind of,
Holding you up, yeah, holding
stable?
you together, yeah, yeah. That you
Well,
don't have
ideally, you would have.
if you're single. You're out there, like you said, flapping about. If you're married, then you also need these buttresses
Yeah.
to hold the marriage together. It doesn't just hold together on its own.
Right. I think, like, to get down to brass tacks, like, second wave feminists were profoundly against marriage, but they were not profoundly against all sexual relationships with men that result in children all too often, and then they have nothing, they offer nothing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and the life of, being a single parent is, it's very difficult, and we can have all kinds of respect for how hard it is, and I do, but at bottom, what we really would like is to prevent that from happening. So if you are I mean, most young people today are not against marriage, they just don't think it's totally necessary. But if
Mhm.
you're going through sexual relationship after sexual relationship and, end up having a child on your own, you are creating a situation for yourself, which is, extremely difficult. I say that, and maybe it sounds harsh creating it for yourself, but this is the cultural norm that we have, we lay it out as a path to follow. But yeah, there that's a difficult path. And ultimately we ought to be teaching people we love and our young, generations coming up that we want them to avoid the more difficult path, right? So yeah, if feminists of the second wave wanted to be so against marriage, they would have had to come out and say, like, you're living entirely alone and chaste till the end of your days, and then, finding your vocational pursuit somewhere else. But they don't say that. So
That sounds like the evil queen talking to Snow White.
oh, really?
Sure, that's what she wanted. She didn't want her to find her prince, have children. She didn't want her to grow up into a successful woman and mother. She was putting as much trouble in her way as she could. And in the West, it's feminism. But in Islam, it's the mothers. It's the mothers who cause trouble with their daughters. They cover them up so that no men can see them. And they don't encourage them. They don't encourage them. And I don't know what that is about the older generation of matriarch, but it can go bad. And so we don't want that. We don't want that kind of message to come to our young women. We want to encourage them to have a life that's fulfilling and abundant. And that life is with a husband and a baby. And, just to stop for a minute and just, not think about who you think you should be, but to imagine if you could have whatever life you could have in 3 to 5 years down the road, if you're taking really good care of yourself and loving yourself and offering yourself to the world, what would that look like? Without all of this feminist narrative
take
that
away
was
the
been
layers
shoved down
of
our throats for so long. My aunt was a feminist. My older sisters had feminism, and I looked at what they were doing, and they were, striving along in their careers and trying to have children at the same time, and their marriages didn't last. And I looked at that and I thought, geez, that doesn't, thank you, sisters, for showing me this, but I don't think that sounds like it's going to work. And so when I get married, I'm going to see who my husband is and what he can do, and I'm not going to get in the way. And I'm going to let him be the father of my kids. I'm going to allow that and be grateful for it, because I don't know everything, and I'm going to make mistakes because I pretty much don't know what I'm doing.
I find myself thinking while you're talking about, why is that controversial, what you've just said? Because it is.
Yeah,
What
why
you
is
just
it?
said is actually
I
very
know.
controversial.
Yep.
And
It
then,
is.
we bring forth the statistics, right, to counter the controversy. And the happiest people are
Yeah.
married parents, like married fathers and married mothers are happiest on
And who's having children?
whatever scales they use to measure these things. But
Christians are having children. Christians are having children. They're having sex,
so
actually. They're having sex. And people who aren't are not having sex.
That's true.
Like the Japanese aren't having sex.
Well,
the South Koreans aren't having sex. People in the world are having sex less. The whole idea of free sex has killed it.
Yeah, the sexual revolution failed on its own measures of success, if you want to put it that way.
Right? It did. It did. So let's be humble and understand that was a mistake. And let's go back to something that worked and bring it forward into the 21st century, because who knows how wonderful that could be.
One grandmother, when I got pregnant, I was, as I mentioned, 42 and had my daughter when I was 1 month shy of 43. So in other words, pretty old, but I was actually really anxious. I was very anxious and alarming to me. I've been pro-life as long as I can remember. Alarming to me, I was kind of like, I don't even know who I am, Anyways, this woman said to me, "You were born to do this. You were made for this." I was like, I was like, come again there. But somehow that stuck with me. Also deeply, deeply controversial. Could you imagine going into a university seminar and telling the women there, you were made to have kids? Like it would just, it would bomb, or be, it would be
you could ask me
controversial.
to come and I'll say that part. And I can bomb and you can be successful. I'm
I don't want to
happy
do
to
that to you.
bomb. I'm happy to bomb. I really am. I feel a real need to make amends with my young self and to talk about this because I didn't do what I knew was closest to my heart. I put it off, and that was a mistake. And I don't want other people to make that mistake.
It would be a fascinating debate theme at a school and to bring forward. I know that in Canada today, I feel like I'm constantly trying to think about, like, I self-censor a lot. I don't know that I have the ability anymore to truly just like be congenial and not unkind, but like ask serious questions and not just parrot what I know I'm supposed to say. Anyways, that's a tough thing in maybe across North America. I do think Americans have that freedom. The vein of like the freedom running through their blood kind of helps them to overcome a bit that. But in Canada today, I often wonder, like, what are the conversations we would be able to have? The thinking that we could do if we would let ourselves, or not be so fearful. And the fears are very real, which I suppose is why self-censorship occurs. But anyways, I think that the book we wrote is a very safe way. And then I see it's 3 p.m. I should go pick up my daughter from school. But the book is a very safe way to approach what became a heated topic and to allow those questions to generate, I think. That's what I'm hoping anyways.
Yeah, well, I think having these conversations, no matter where they go, is a good idea. And bringing up, I think, feminism and its misdirection and admitting that it was a misdirection is a good thing to do too. So I like that you brought it up so many times. That was very good. That was very good.
Too many times.
No, not too many times. I've talked to both. I don't know if you have Carrie Gress.
Oh, I have. I want to get one or two of her books. I haven't yet, but I will.
And Janice Fiamengo.
I do look up to her.
Yeah.
She is interesting.
You could talk to her. And she has a book, Fourth Generation Sons of the Feminist Revolution is her book.
She's a good woman. She's thinking
she is
controversially.
And so is Carrie. Carrie Gress is also very good. So you could actually talk to them.
To end on a hopeful note, there's so many good voices. I think Louise Perry is a great voice. Mary Harrington is a great voice.
Yeah, that's right.
Those names you just mentioned as well. And there are others. So it's hopeful in many respects.
Yes, that's right. And thank you very much, because I think the more we talk about these things, the more likely it is that people will listen.
I hope so. And I appreciate you talking with me today as well.
My pleasure. I take your hand for a year.
I say I go jogging and listen to podcasts, so I sometimes jokingly say, oh yeah, I jog with Tammy Peterson, or I jog with Tara Henley, or whoever, right? Meanwhile, like, I'm not really jogging with them. Someone once asked me, like, you know Tim Keller? I'm like, no. Podcasts.
Right.
Podcasts. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, podcasts.
Anyways, yeah.
We are the news large now, so
yeah.
That's the way to go.
I gotta run and get my daughter here, but thanks again for the conversation.
Hey, my pleasure. And if there's anything I can do to help in any way, just let me know, okay?
I appreciate that. God bless you. I also just mentioned appreciate your tone, and the way you talk it brings anxieties down. So
Oh good.
That's good.
My pleasure.
So take care.